Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And we are in the midst of spooky season here. So I hope everyone's enjoying your autumn and the cooler weather and horror movies and Halloween decorations and just general spookiness all over the place. This week, I'm going to be talking some more Bigfoot sightings. And we're traveling to Montana this week. And this is at the request of a listener, and their name is Misguided Angel 6550 on YouTube, and they had requested some other parts of the country to do some Bigfoot reports from. I typically, in the past, have stuck mainly to places I've been, so it's been a lot of like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and New York. But I do appreciate when people sort of give me ideas and requests of where to focus my attention. And Montana was a good one because I don't think most people, when they think of Bigfoot, are thinking Montana. It's out, on the northern part of the continental United States. It's bordered by Idaho to the west. These are not places that people typically think of to have Bigfoot sightings, and I figured it was a good way to head into Montana and look at some Bigfoot sightings. Last week I did a paranormal mailbag, so it was basically your comments, your stories, emails, things like that, and it was a pretty popular episode. So I'm going to be doing those again. So again, I do enjoy the feedback. I do like being able to sort of target people's interests. Western New York has gotten a lot of people saying they appreciate me talking about Western New York. I guess the Adirondacks gets a lot of love, but Western New York, not so much. So I'm going to be doing more Western New York stuff, sightings, whether it's UFOs or Bigfoot from around like the Finger Lakes area and other places in Western New York coming up. But this week we're focusing on Montana. And again, if you guys have stories or suggestions of places you'd like me to cover, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, and I will gladly handle that for you because I am always looking for new ideas. Uh, been trying to get some guests on the show, but it's been difficult mainly due to my schedule, uh, battling some personal illnesses and issues at home. My schedule's just been very erratic, and it's been hard for me to sort of fairly schedule a guest because things happen at the last minute where I may have to cancel. So for now, if you guys have stories you want me to share on here, if you have local urban legends or local cryptids, things that aren't out there as much, odd and untold. So untold part of that, if you have local legends, lots of things that I've never heard about, like Racetown Ray, the lake monster in Pennsylvania. I had never heard of that because it's not in the books. And a lot of these cryptozoology books or paranormal books, they regurgitate a lot of the same stories. And these lesser known stories just never really get out there. And that's kind of my jam. I want to talk about these lesser known stories. So again, if you have something that you feel is not really covered much, or a personal story, let me know. I'm happy to cover it here on the show. So with all that being said, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for making the show possible. And I appreciated the feedback on all the shows, but especially last week. That was great, just interacting with a lot of you. So let's move on to Bigfoot sightings in Montana. So, for the purposes of this episode, I'm focusing on one county, and this is the county in Montana that had the most numerous amount of Bigfoot sightings. This is Lewis and Clark County, which is a pretty cool name for a county for someone who enjoys exploration. I'm taking these from the BFRO website, as I usually do, so take all these with a grain of salt. But I felt like these were pretty good stories, and this being spooky season, I decided to focus on stories that were very hard to debunk. Usually in my episodes, I try to give a balance in the stories where there are some that are clearly, these people are seeing something versus, howls or wood knocks or things that could be debunked. I usually try to throw in at least one or two stories that can be debunked fairly easily, just to kind of show that fairness, because I do approach things from a skeptical point of view. It doesn't mean I'm a skeptic, but every story I hear, I go in skeptical and I kind of let the facts sway me versus just blindly believing a story. And that doesn't mean that the witness is a liar or whatever, it just means, can we explain this with something else? So, but it's spooky season and I wanted to have some fun So no debunking this week. These are going to be stories that are pretty clear. These people saw something or they're lying, and I don't believe they are. I don't believe people will write some of the lengthy stories that you're going to hear tonight and then meet with investigators and show them around and then stay anonymous. It's just weird. I don't know why people would do that. So I don't think any of these people are lying, and I don't think any of them are really mistaken in what they're seeing. Most of these are very clear stories. So first story, possible daylight sighting while driving on a roller road between Helena and Great Falls. And this happened in May of 2015, Lewis and Clark County. And some details here have been removed per the witness's request. And I had mentioned this last week because somebody had commented in the comments of like, do we name where these things happened? Because you don't want swarms of Bigfoot hunters kind of closing in on the location and hooting and hollering and banging on trees. And it just, it could be tricky. So I understand why they didn't want this specified and they removed this information. So let us get on to what they observed. So he says, while traveling up the dirt road I live on, I passed a road off to my right. As I passed by the road, I saw in the distance, about a quarter mile away, a figure. It looked to be all black and walking on two legs. I initially thought someone was walking down the road, but no person ever walks down my road. It is private property, and then it dawned on me that they were not wearing all black clothes, but the head and hands were also black. The gait of the walk was different than anything I've ever seen as well. It was almost like a saunter. After I passed the intersection, I stopped and backed up to get a better look, and it was gone. Also noticed, I was keeping my eyes open for a moose cow, which my son and I had seen that morning. It is very rare to see a moose this far south and central in the state. It had seemed to be very sickly or exhausted. I had actually expected to find it dead somewhere. Then I saw this thing at the same location within a third of a mile within an hour. So it was just he alone. Other stories, I've never heard of any sightings in this area prior to seeing them on this site, the BFRO website. All 7 Lewis and Clark sightings are within a few miles of here. So that's interesting that other sightings happened around this guy's property. He says it was about 7:20 in the morning, clear and bright morning. And there is a follow-up investigation here by BFRO investigators Caitlin and Thomas Ertz. And they say, after speaking with the witness, we found his account to be truthful and insightful. And there's some good information in here. Witness is a retired special forces and moved to the area a year ago in hopes of solitude. He has in the last year identified numerous wildlife that are in the area year-round: elk, deer, antelope, geese, duck, fish, and black bear. And it should be noted that in addition to black bear, Montana does have grizzlies, unlike here on the East Coast. So something to keep in mind. He has lived in the area for a little over a year. Witness is extremely familiar with the property and is not afraid to walk at night around the property when he is unable to sleep. The witness was driving home early in the morning, about to go up a steep incline, which is in his driveway, but to do so must cross the roller road, accessing additional houses to the right and downhill. Unable to see houses from the road and unable to see them from a viewpoint of where the witness saw the figure. As he looked for additional cars coming up the hill to safely cross to his driveway, he spotted what he first assessed as a person walking. Witness had a 4 to 5 second view of the figure before the sight line was hindered. Witness processed quickly what he saw and had no recollection of ever seeing anyone in the area walking on the road. He reversed back to the intersection and the figure was gone. Witness saw 4 steps: left leg front, right leg front, left leg front, right leg front. In 3 steps, the figure had made it across the roller road from one side to the other. He said what was peculiar was how the figure moved. As the left leg moved forward, the witness was able to see the full backside of the figure. As the right leg moved, he was able to see the full front of the figure. So it seems like this thing was like really making exaggerated strides. The witness described this as a swinging type motion. Witness also described how even with the warmth of the morning, the figure appeared bundled from head to toe in a dark or black color. This was unusual as it was not cold nor overcast and early morning. Witness said it was fairly easy for him to sneak up on animals familiar with the area when driving his pickup because it is fairly quiet. As he was driving parallel to the figure and as the figure was downslope of him, he believes it would have been difficult to have heard his pickup and or difficult to place where his pickup was on the road for the figure. So they go into a lot of detail here. And they talk about how other people came out and they estimated that this thing was probably about over 8 feet tall. And I'm not going to read all this because, like I said, this gets a little wordsy here. Um, but they did some size comparisons. They had um, another person come out who was 6'1", 275 pounds. The witness says that this creature was taller than this person, bigger than this person. It took this very tall adult 8 steps to cross the road, where the Bigfoot, he says, only took about 4. So you're talking a large creature. And we hear this a lot with the road crossings, that these creatures can cross a 2-lane highway or 2-lane road in 2 or 3 steps, where a person would have to take very large strides and probably 4 or 5 minimum. So not a bear, clearly not a bear. And again, I appreciate that this guy says at first he just thought it was a person walking up the road, and bundled up. But why is this guy bundled up? And then he's seeing that it's a larger person. It's, uh, you know, covered in black hair, head to toe. So that this is a clear sighting. This is someone who clearly saw something. He's special forces, a trained person, very skilled. He's not going to see a bear or a man in a ghillie suit and think this is Bigfoot. It's out of the corner of his eye. He's seeing someone moving, thinks it's a person, gets a better look. So very clearly a sighting. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot, but I can't see this being a bear. Again, black bear, grizzly bears, they're not going to walk on 2 legs. They're not ever going to do that. This is a guy who's familiar with the wildlife around his home. I don't like the bear excuse in most cases. I think there are some Bigfoot sightings, quote unquote Bigfoot sightings, that are so vague and so far away and so fleeting that they could be bear. And I call those out when they do pop up. But this one, I do not think could have been a bear. What do you guys think about this one? It's a good sighting, not a very long sighting, but I think you have a witness here who's trained. He's familiar with wildlife. And again, the follow-up is very long. I'm going to link to all these in the description below so you guys can read all of this. But from their testimony, from what the witness was measuring, he's saying 8'7" probably. So 8.5, a little over 8.5 feet tall. So that is very tall and within the range. Nothing in the woods is going to be that tall except for a grizzly. And I'm guessing he would know if he saw a grizzly bear. So let us move on to the next story. So story number 2 involves some Boy Scouts. The Scouts watch a creature eating leaves along the Dearborn River. So again, this is a clear sighting. This happened in July of 1978. Lewis and Clark County. The nearest town is Helena. Nearest road is I-15. And observed. He says, I was 11 or 12 at the time. I was at a Boy Scout jamboree. I've been to some jamborees. They're cool. My friend came to me and asked if I believed in Bigfoot. He then told me to follow him because he saw a Bigfoot. We walked about a half mile to the river's edge. Across the river, we watched what looked like a large gorilla-like creature about 6 feet tall, standing next to the river, picking leaves off of a bush and eating them. We watched for a couple of minutes until it walked into the brush and disappeared. It was not a bear. It picked the leaves off the tree just as a human would. We stayed in the area as much as possible the next few days, but never saw it again. Also noticed nothing else noteworthy, except that there were at least 100 people in the area camping, fishing, and participating in the Boy Scout activities. And that's interesting because the Boy Scout Jamboree is usually scout troops from all over the region. So lots of kids, lots of scout leaders, lots of adults, and there's activities and there's singing, and it's a loud sort of thing. So it's interesting that they saw something. It says about a half mile away, but still definitely interesting that they saw something where there were so many people. He says it was daylight. It was a sunny day in a grass field next to a river, and it's pulling leaves. Bears don't do that. They're going to use their mouth to kind of grab whatever they're eating. But this thing was picking leaves off a bush and eating them. So very interesting. The follow-up investigation, the investigator is not listed, but I will read what they say. The witness offered the following additional observations during a phone interview. The sighting occurred along the Dearborn River, not far from where it joins the Missouri River. The animal was on the opposite bank of the river from the boys, about 100 yards away, so about a football field. The animal stood with its back to the boys, apparently unaware they were watching. So this is something we hear a lot too, and I don't quite get it because these are supposed to be like really intelligent primates, and then every now and then you hear them doing something stupid like running out in front of an oncoming car or they have their back turned and people are seeing them. And I guess that's, they're going to be surprised sometimes. But it was unaware that they were being watched, this creature. The animal stood upright. It was black in color. It used its hands, not together to gather and pull leaves to its mouth, but individually to pluck and put leaves into its mouth. So that is a very human or primate activity. The witness is an avid big game hunter. He was certain the animal was not a bear or a man. If it was a man, he was in a Bigfoot suit, the witness said, and he did not believe it was a man in a suit because he thought a hoax would have been staged much differently. No one else at the Boy Scout Jamboree saw it. And that's a good point. If you're going to hoax something, you want people to see it. If you're hoaxing footprints, if you're going to dress up in a suit, you're doing this to be seen. You're not going to drive 6 miles into the woods where there's nobody and dance around in a Bigfoot suit or put footprints in the ground where nobody may ever see them. It may rain. It may, other animals are going to walk through that. Nobody may ever see these things. So why put in all that effort if no one's going to see it? If you're going to scare kids, you're going to maybe dress in the Bigfoot suit and go into the jamboree and get seen and scare the kids. I mean, that's the fun of the hoax. So it's interesting that it was so far away from the main activity. When asked what the animal was, if not a bear or a man, the witness would not say Bigfoot or Sasquatch, though it was clear that is what he thought he saw. The whereabouts of the friend who first saw the creature are unknown. And I get that. I was in the Scouts, and if I had to track down any of my Scout mates today, it would be nearly impossible. I remember some of their first names, but not their last names. Like, I just don't have that information anymore. So interesting. And again, interesting that the witness is not saying Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Like, he would not say it. And you see this a lot as well. People will see things and they'll tell you they saw a strange bear or they saw a strange wild man, and they don't want to admit that what they saw was not a bear or not a man, and maybe that it was Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So I think that's interesting as well. And they follow up the investigation by saying there was no question in my mind that the witness was being honest. He and his friend saw an animal that stood picking and eating leaves along the Dearborn River using its hands. It's reminiscent of the Bauman story, which I don't know what they're talking about there, but very clearly something is using its hands. Now, could this have been an escaped monkey or gorilla? I suppose. It's clearly not a bear. Bear is not going to use its paw to pull leaves off. It'll just go and bite them off. But the escaped gorilla thing is almost as bad as the bear thing. It's always like, oh, something escaped from a local zoo, or something escaped from a local circus, or a train was going through and a gorilla escaped and just nobody ever mentioned it. Just weird. That's almost weirder than accepting the Bigfoot explanation. But I thought this was a very cool story because these kids saw something that they couldn't explain. And I appreciate that he's not saying Bigfoot. I mean, that to me just says he's still skeptical about what he saw, but it was strange. A gorilla-like creature pulling leaves off, putting them in its mouth with its hand. It had hands. Very strange. Just not sure what to make of that, but it sounds like a credible sighting. So let's move on. Okay, story number 3. More boys observing a hairy man-like creature several times. This comes to us from summer of 1982. The nearest town is Lincoln. Nearest road is Stonewall Creek Road. And this is a longer narrative here, so I will read this. Observed. It all started in the summer of 1982. Mount St. Helens had erupted earlier, about a year or so before. Myself and my cousin, my brother, and a family friend decided we would go hiking. Me and my friend were both 15 at the time, and my cousin was 14. My brother was 13. We went into the woods carrying nothing but BB guns. We could not see nothing at the time, but I had been hiking in those woods about 5 years by myself with my brother, and I never had a care in the world. This included a run-in with a grizzly. I felt as if we were being watched. For some reason, the hair on the back of my neck even stood up. We could not see anything at the time, so we continued on. Well, a thunderstorm started in, and we started back towards my cabin. I guess we went out about 2 miles before we had to start back. I still feel as if something or someone was watching us. I just knew it. But whatever it was did not make a sound, nor would it let us see it. Well, we kept on, and finally we heard something in the woods ahead of us. Well, we stopped, and to be honest, we're scared, so we stayed put for a while and just listened. Well, the noise stopped, and we continued back towards the cabin, this time a little faster than normal. So 2 things here before I go on. This sounds like paralleling. They stop, the sound stops, they move, the sound goes. But we hear this a lot from hunters and other people who are familiar with being out in the woods. they've encountered bears, they've encountered coyotes, they've encountered all sorts of predators, and it doesn't bother them. But then they have an experience with, an alleged Bigfoot, and they will say that this was different. They had a different feeling, the hair on the back of their neck, or they just had a weird feeling in the pit of their stomach that it scared them. They're not afraid of the bears. I mean, they may have a respectful fear of the bears, but they're not surprised by it. They're not surprised by their own reactions. And you do hear this in a lot of Bigfoot stories where these are people who've hunted bears. They've hunted out there with these other predators, and it doesn't phase them. They have the respect. They understand they should be afraid of these things, but when they encounter the Bigfoot, it's different. So I just wanted to point that out. So let me continue. Well, when we finally broke out of the woods, about 400 yards from the cabin, I looked towards the end of the wood line and I saw a figure standing up and looking at us. And that's another thing we hear a lot of. It's almost like a tree stump and then it'll stand up. So really strange. So this figure stood up and was looking at them. My friend also saw it, as well as my cousin and my brother. It was black in color and looked to be at least 6 foot tall. It was about 200 yards away from us, so we did not know if it was a bear. Well, we went back to the cabin and told our parents what had happened, and they had no explanation for it. My mother grew up there, and she had no idea. So possibly a bear. They're seeing it from a distance. They're not seeing a lot of detail. It could have been a bear just reared up on its hind legs. So let's continue. Well, about 2 days later, we got brave again, and on a bright sunny day, our same group headed out into the same area. Well, we got about 300 yards in the woods, and we came upon a footprint. It was in the mud and well formed like a human print. Well, I wear a size 12 shoe and have since I was about 12 years old and put my foot into the print, and it was a good 4 to 6 inches longer than mine and a lot wider. Well, I know what a bear print looks like, as well as prints from the various animals in the area, and the bear print was as close as I could come up with, but it had more human-like toes and not the long claws you would see with a bear. Well, we decided to get the heck out of the area. When we walked back out of the woods and back towards the cabin, instead of walking the area of the wood line, we took a path across the field. All of a sudden, my friend stopped and tried to speak. He almost turned pale white and he could not talk. He pointed into an area in the woods. I finally saw what he saw. Sitting on an old tree stump about 5 yards into the woods was what I believed to be a Bigfoot. We were only 50 yards away from him, and I could see clearly it sat there looking at us, and, well, it looked in another direction while we were staring at it, and it was like he did not have a neck. He moved his whole upper torso and then looked back at us. Well, when he did this, we took off running. So you hear this a lot in the Bigfoot stories, too, that human beings have the neck, and when we want to turn our heads, it's very easy. But a Bigfoot, the head sits lower on the shoulders, so when it turns, it basically has to turn its whole torso. If you look at the Patterson-Gimlin footage, that's what it does. It doesn't just turn its head, it turns its whole torso towards Roger Patterson's camera, and then turns its whole torso back to keep walking. So an interesting detail. So he continues, I am now a police officer and have been for many years and still have never been as scared as I was that very minute. So again, a police officer, trained observer. When we got to the cabin, we told my friend's parents as well as my mom what we saw and what had happened. My friend's dad got his pistol and I got my dad's 7mm deer rifle, and we went back out. It was me, my friend's dad, and my friend. We went back into the wooded area and looked around for about an hour or so and found nothing. We then proceeded back out of the woods the same way we did when we saw this thing on the stump. I looked up towards my cabin and saw my mom. She was waving her hands and yelling, so I waved back. Well, you have to know my mom. She does not, I repeat, does not run for anything. Well, she took off in a sprint towards us, and when she got about 100 yards from us, she yelled that the creature was behind us. Well, I turned and looked with my dad's rifle ready, and I saw the back of the creature just for a second go in the woods. We then went back to the cabin and reported this to the local game and fish department. They responded later that evening, and we took the game warden to the area where we were at. We could not find the print we had seen earlier, and I think he thought we were nuts. Well, about the time we were coming back out, we found a bush that had been laid flat as if something had been sleeping there, and it smelled. This was the only time I smelled anything. It smelled like really bad body odor mixed with urine and feces. We did not find any more evidence. I've been back in the area many times. I do go out with a rifle, but I would not shoot this creature. I feel if this creature was harmful towards me, it could have killed me many times in the woods. We did have some people come from another state about a week later and ask if we were the ones who did the report, and we told them no. I don't want a bunch of gun-toting idiots out there trying to hunt this thing. The way I figure, it has been there a lot longer than me, and I need to respect its home. So, again, someone else who doesn't want the publicity, doesn't want people out there, doesn't want people shooting guns or hooting and hollering and banging on trees. So interesting. The last sighting of the day was sunny, not overcast, and about 80 degrees. Very nice Montana day. Lightly wooded area with pine trees and a creek that runs just inside of the tree line. So this is another kind of familiar story. You hear a lot of stories like this where there's something in the tree line, there's something looking at them. It parallels them, it follows them out. It's almost like escorting them out of the woods, making sure they're actually leaving the woods. And I think it's interesting that the mother is watching these guys come out of the woods and like there's something behind you. Bears aren't going to do stuff like that. So I don't know what this was. He doesn't go into a lot of detail here. He says he believes it was a Bigfoot sitting on the tree stump. And 5 yards away, that's 15 feet. So a decent closeness, not super close, but also not super far, not 100 yards. So interesting. Not sure what to make of this one. Again, not a lot of detail. The body odor, smell mixed with feces and urine, that's a very common thing that people say they smell with Bigfoot, but other animals in the woods can be musky. So maybe this was something else. But again, this seems to be a very clear sighting. And there's no follow-up investigation here from the BFRO. I don't know if this person just never left contact info or they just haven't gotten around to it. This was submitted in 1999. So they've had 25 years to work on this and nothing yet. So interesting story. Let us move on. So story number 4, we're looking at summer of 1977. So we're going back a ways now. Fly fisherman sees a hairy bipedal creature while trout fishing. So the location details: along the eastern shore of the Missouri River, about 3/4 of a mile below Hauser Dam, northeast of Helena. Nearest town is Helena. Observed, I had hiked downstream of the Missouri River from Hauser Dam for an evening of fly fishing for rainbow trout. This was during August 1977. As usual, I kept fishing until well after dark. About 11 p.m., there was no moonlight, and it was so dark I could only see a few feet in front of me. I had a large flashlight lamp with me, which I laid on a large boulder with my fly box. Just below the boulder, I placed some rocks in a circle near the river's edge to put my trout so they would keep fresh. I was fishing about 20 yards upstream of the boulder that held my lamp when I suddenly realized that I had lost my fly. I proceeded back towards the boulder to put on another fly. As I approached the boulder, I could see some kind of movement, but it was too dark to make out what it was. When I reached the boulder, I switched on my lamp with the beam pointing above the boulder towards some brush up the steep embankment. I was startled to hear a cracking sound and see movement from the bush. I pointed the beam directly at the movement, only 10 feet from me, and got a full view of a hairy bipedal creature moving very rapidly up the bank and quartering away from me in the downstream direction. It was very large and muscular, with long dark hair and seemingly no neck. So again, we're hearing that no neck thing. Estimated height is about 7 to 8 feet, guessing 400 to 500 pounds. I could not see its face as it was moving away from me. It took long, powerful strides, and its arms moved powerfully as a man would, walking very rapidly. So again, not a bear. Bear on 2 legs are very kind of clumsy. This is moving on 2 legs and swinging its arms powerfully like a man. It was amazing to see how quickly it traversed over the boulders and up the steep embankment. I had the creature in the lamp beam for only a few seconds before it disappeared into the darkness. So again, it's moving uphill, and a human being unencumbered trying to walk uphill in the wild, in the bush, is difficult. There's rocks, there's twigs, there's roots, there's bushes. It's very difficult. So just unencumbered, it's a difficult task to do gracefully or at all. And if you assume that this is a man in a costume, a man in a ghillie suit, almost impossible. And a bear, like I said, is not going to walk on 2 legs. So he continues, I was stunned at what I had just seen and tried to rationalize what it could have been. For some strange reason, I felt absolutely no fear. The sense I had was that this was an animal of some sort that was frightened away by my light and posed no threat to me. However, that changed somewhat when I shined the lamp towards the rock pool where I had been keeping my trout. Before the sighting of the creature, I had 4 trout ranging from 2 to 3 pounds in the pool. After the sighting, there were only 2 trout. This explained the movement I detected as I was approaching the boulder. The creature must have been innocently foraging along the river's edge and found an easy meal. What caused me some concern was that the creature might come back and fight for the remaining 2 fish, which I think is a legitimate concern. Then I heard a boulder crashing down the hillside, probably several hundred yards down the river. I therefore felt some comfort that the creature was still running away from me. At that point, I picked up the 2 remaining trout and hiked back up to Hauser Dam and across the river to my vehicle and went home. I have only told the story to my wife, a couple of close friends, and to a bona fide researcher in Helena. Also noticed nothing. I went back the following day and found no tracks because of the rocks and boulders, no other signs at all. Other witnesses, I was alone fly fishing for trout. This was about 11 p.m. No moonlight, and it was so dark I can only see a few feet in front of me. He says the terrain is steep and rocky as it is in a deep river canyon. Vegetation is pine, prickly pear cactus, sagebrush, and along the river, small willows and brush. Along the river itself, mostly huge boulders and rocks. The elevation is about 3,800 feet. So a very rocky terrain. So no footprints. That makes sense. And again, it makes it just tougher to believe that a human being was climbing up these things, because as a hiker, as a camper, anytime you hit any sort of incline, you're going to slow down. You have to watch where you step because you could twist an ankle. And it's just very hard. It's very hard going up these embankments, especially at night. And he's saying, he's shining the flashlight on this thing. This thing's running through the woods without a flashlight. Clearly, if it had a flashlight, you're going to say that that's a person. So how would a man in a suit walk up an embankment like that in the pitch black darkness? And again, a lot of people don't realize how dark the woods can get unless you've been out there. Most people who live in the city, lights go out. There's always light pollution. So even though it's dark, you can always see. But when you're out there and there's no light pollution, when it's dark out and there's no moon, you cannot see. You cannot see very well at all. So I fully believe this person that he saw something he could not explain, 7, 8 feet tall, running up the hill, and his trout were gone. And I don't blame him for leaving, because this thing may have come back, maybe not when he was awake, but maybe in his sleep, maybe when he was sleeping. So later in the night, this thing probably would have come back and tried to get those other 2 fish. So a very cool encounter, very creepy. It's spooky to be out there by yourself and see something like this. And now you just got, it's like time to go, time to pack. So let me know what you guys think of these stories. I like this one. Okay, so the last story I'm going to talk about this week is a pretty cool one. It's a short one, but I think it's pretty cool. Motorist and passenger see a white creature standing off I-15. And we have mentioned I-15 earlier in one of the other stories. This was in winter of 1981. And they say, unsure of the exact date, late fall of 1981 or early spring of 1982, probably between November and February. And I talked about this last week and in some other episodes, that when these things happen, we often forget the exact date because it's not important. You're paying attention to where you were, what you're seeing, how you felt, what happened during the encounter, whether it's a UFO, whether it's Bigfoot. You're not really remembering, oh, this was 11:18 p.m. and it was, 32 degrees out and this is the date. A lot of people forget these things. It happens, you tell people, and over the years, and this happened in probably 1981, you forget the exact date. You just kind of remember what you were doing, and you remember it was cold because there was snow, or you remember it was hot because, it was hot, so it was summer. So this happened in Wolf Creek Canyon near Wolf Creek, Montana, off of I-15, returning to Helena after a trip to Great Falls. Nearest town is Helena, nearest road, I-15. Observed. While returning to Helena after a trip to Great Falls, I saw something illuminated in the car's headlights on a mountainside approximately 150 feet or less off of I-15. Trying to interpret what I saw, I didn't say anything at first. Then a few seconds later, my girlfriend said, "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" It literally sent a chill down my spine, and all I could think of to say was, "You saw that too?" She simply said, "Yes." I don't know what it was, but I know what it wasn't. So this is, key here. It definitely wasn't a bear, goat, sheep, deer, elk, lion, dog, or any other wildlife that lives around here. And by lion, I'm guessing he means like mountain lion, not like African lion. It was white, standing erect in excess of 6 feet tall, and appeared to be just watching traffic on the highway. Hard to say, really, because of the duration of the sighting was only a few seconds and it was dark. I find it hard to believe that someone was out there late at night in freezing weather, standing in the snow in the middle of nowhere in a gorilla suit, especially a white gorilla suit. So I ruled that out as well. So he makes some really good points here. One, if you're hoaxing, you're going to do it where you're seen. Two, a gorilla suit. Where are you going to get a white gorilla suit? Why would you get a white gorilla suit if you want someone to think, hey, I'm tricking them into thinking they're seeing Bigfoot? You're going to go with the stereotypical Bigfoot. You're going to go with a brown or a black suit. You're going to try to look as much as what we all think of as Bigfoot looking like. And there are accounts of Bigfoot with lighter color hair, gray or white or blonde. And we hear this a lot. I don't know what it means, but it is interesting that they're seeing a white Bigfoot. And the girlfriend sees it too. So now you have multiple witnesses. It's not a road crossing, but it's kind of standing at the road looking, watching traffic. I mean, that's weird. And again, if someone's going to hoax, why are they going to go out into the snow? It just doesn't make sense. If you have to get away quickly, usually, people carry guns in these rural areas. They hunt, they carry guns to protect themselves from wildlife. If they see something, they might just shoot it. So if someone out there is in a gorilla suit at night in the snow and you get shot, like, you're kind of asking for it. Other witnesses, just one witness and myself riding back from Glen Falls to Helena. No alcohol, drugs, or anything else that could have conceivably altered our conception of what we saw. And that's another good point. Skeptics will always say, were you drinking? Were you on drugs? And lots of people drink and they don't see Bigfoot. Lots of people do drugs and they don't see Bigfoot. So that's one of those other things that skeptics will always bring up. And I just think it's a moot point. I mean, I don't know how many drugs you have to be on to see a mythical creature. And why would it always be Bigfoot? If you're that high, you're going to see pink elephants and unicorns and dragons and other stuff too. It's not always just going to be Bigfoot. And it's not going to be a fleeting thing. It's going to be, hey, yeah, Bigfoot came and sat down next to me and we listened to this Led Zeppelin album and talked politics. Like, it's not going to be this fleeting thing. So very strange. The environment, steep, rough, wooded, rocky canyon. So again, rocky, steep, dry country with a creek and an interstate highway. So again, why this kind of roadside thing? Near the Missouri River, elevation probably around 4,000 to 4,500 feet with snow on the ground at the time. After nearly 20 years, I probably can't determine the spot much closer than 2 or 3 miles. And yeah, I get that. You're driving, it's going fast. Something can fall off your car and you think, oh, it's only 20 feet back. And then by the time you backtrack, you're like, oh, this is a lot further than I thought it was, because you're moving so quickly and your brain can't perceive that. And that it's happened to me. I was camping one time and I had, my son had his fishing pole on top of the car and I didn't realize. I got in the car to go to the store and I'm driving and boom, I hear something on the road. And I'm like, what was that? And I look back in my rear view and I can see the fishing pole. I'm like, crap, he put the fishing pole on top of the car and I didn't notice it. And when I stopped and went back, it was just so much further back than where I thought I had dropped it. So our perceptions can be off. And then, yeah, you're talking 20 years later, because this was another one submitted in 1999. So almost 20 years later, but a white Sasquatch. And like I said, we do hear about different colored ones. I mean, the brown and blacks are the ones that you hear a lot, brown and black fur, sometimes a reddish brown, but we do have white and blonde and gray. Some people say like almost like a silverback, like dark hair, but like silver on the back. So very interesting. Not sure what to make of this one. But interesting that the girlfriend saw it and they both are kind of speechless when they see it. And then they just, do you believe in Bigfoot? You saw that too? Yep. Almost like a traumatic thing. Like they both saw this and both were almost kind of afraid to say anything, but then they both confirmed that they each saw it. So very cool story. I like this one. All right, everybody. So that covers this week's stories. A few stories from Montana. I will revisit this at some point, but this particular county had the most stories and the most like class A, which on the BFRO website mean like you're seeing something. It's not just a track. It's not just a howl or a tree knock. Like you're seeing a figure. And that's what I really wanted to focus on and to pick stories that probably couldn't be a bear. These things are taking strides. It's not just something peeking around a tree. It's not something way off in the distance. I mean, these people are seeing something. They're seeing it walk bipedally, taking big strides, swinging its arms, turning its whole torso to look at them at points. Bears are not going to do that. Doesn't matter if it's a grizzly or a black bear, a bear standing up on its hind legs. It's usually an intimidation tactic or to reach food. It's not their normal mode of transportation. If a bear is trying to run away from you up a hill, it's going to go down on all fours. It's not going to walk bipedally, and it's not going to walk powerfully. It's going to, everybody has seen a bear kind of walk, and it's almost like a toddler. It's like a big, bulky toddler. They're very uncertain on their hind legs. And like I said, it's really just done for intimidation or to reach food. Other than that, they don't really do it. Or if they're trained in a circus or a zoo. So very cool stories this week. I hope you guys are enjoying spooky season. Again, if you have a story that you would like to share, Jason at oddanuntold.com. Send your feedback, leave comments on YouTube or anywhere where you're listening to this. I respond to all of them. I love engaging with you guys, and I will probably do another episode of Paranormal Mailbag. I don't know if they're going to be like bonus episodes or if I'm going to do them as like main episodes. I don't know how often I'm going to do them. I guess it depends on how often you guys comment and how good the stories are and how good the comments are. But keep them coming. I love talking to you guys. It's been awesome. And hope everybody's enjoying autumn. Happy Halloween, everybody. We'll have another episode next week for Halloween. I'm going to publish a day early, so it'll be on Thursday, just because that's when Halloween is. So until then, everybody, question everything. Even these stories that seem pretty straightforward, you got to question them. Doesn't mean they actually saw Bigfoot. It's just, it couldn't be a bear, but could they have been a man in a gorilla suit or a ghillie suit? Possibly. It's always possible. Could they have been mistaken with what they saw? Possibly. Could they be lying? Of course. But I just don't think people tend to lie and expend this amount of energy to lie for no gain. What is it getting them? A lot of these people don't use their names. They're not giving the exact locations. They're meeting with investigators afterwards and spending time and time. Just, I don't know why people would lie about that. So, till next week, everybody, rock and roll.